Hello everyone, this is Atmanityananda and his online spiritual academy Advaita Atma Yoga Academy. I would like today to speak about a very important and very controversial and difficult subject related to human life, spirituality also. Free will. Do we, human beings, do we have free will? We have this capacity we call free will to choose what we really want, or free will is just an illusion? We think that we can freely choose what we want, but in reality, something else than us, an element which is not us, which can be the brain, as some scientists say, decide for us. And then we say, yes, I want this, but this I want this is only uh, an illusory thought or feeling also that is created also in our brain and gives this feeling or thought gives us the impression that we are the ones that we have decided to do this or that. We have chosen what we have chosen. While in reality, all these have been processed by something different than us. And that's why they say also, and also spiritual teachers, that this sense of I is just an illusion. Is this all these things are true or not? This is the point. Do we have free will? Do we can consciously decide what we want? Or this is something that happens by itself? It is an automatic process and appears to us that we have decided something, while in reality something else have decided this, and because of illusion we think and feel I have decided to do this or that. What do you think? This is a very difficult subject, but in my experience read, I have read, and I have listened various uh, teachers, spiritual teachers, and scientists and philosophers, who could say, to speak about this very important subject. But I'm not satisfied the way they investigated and the way they had conclusions about this. So we can say, yes, we have, or we don't have. But in my experience and understanding and consciousness, we have to clarify some important things like this. One, what is free will? What does really free will mean? What does it mean? I have free will. First, without this, any effort to analyze and understand and figure out if free will exists or not, in my understanding, it is not valid. If we don't define with precision what really free will is, we cannot uh, have true conclusions. We cannot find the truth. Second, what a human being is. We have to be very conscious what a human being is, because without knowing this also, we cannot investigate uh, profoundly and correctly what free will is. So we must know, or we must define what really free will means or is. Second, what a human being is. Third, what, and this includes also this sense of individuality or I-ness. What really is this? And third, what is the factor or the element that decides? I'm here in the football field, stadium. They play football. Let's see. Yes, they are children. I don't see of what, how old they are, what their age is. Anyway, so, or what are the capacities, or what are the elements that have the capacity to decide? For example, a human being is physical body, vital energy, and psychic energy, mind, which has various aspects like external or sensory mind, emotional mind, thinking mind, intellect, lower intellect, higher intellect, which is intelligence, and subconscious mind, and ego. And also, a human being is also consciousness. It is soul. We cannot disregard this because this is the most important thing. We are not a machine. We are a human, alive, human being, and our true nature and the center of our existence is consciousness. What we call divinity, divine consciousness we are. However, all human beings are not at the same level of consciousness. Although essentially we are all consciousness, we have not realized that we are conscious, all human beings. Most of human beings live in ignorance. So, and also have an undeveloped or low developed psyche, mind and intellect. So, this free will is not something that applies to everyone, every single person, because we live in a different state of consciousness and a different state of psychological development. So there are, for example, there are people that they are worse than animals. I repeat it, they are people that they are worse than animals. So these people, these human beings, certainly they have not free will at all. How can they have free will since they are in a state of consciousness that is worse than the animals? And in the other extreme, we have divine beings like Jesus Christ, like Krishna, like Buddha, like Harakam Babaji, my beloved teacher, like Swami Sivananda, Ramana Maharshi, and other teachers who are in reality divine beings. They are not human beings anymore because they have realized fully their divine essence and they have manifested, expressed this divinity in them. So we cannot speak in general. Human beings have or do not have free will. It is pointless and meaningless. That's why I told you in the beginning that we must examine what really free will one, what a human being is, and what in a human being has this capacity of free will. Without knowing well these three factors, we could say, without knowing well what does it mean, free will, what is a human being, what decides and has free will in us, because as I said, a human being is a multidimensional being. So it is very clear, for example, that the physical body has no free will. It's a machine. It's a biological machine. Our physical body cannot have free will, just functions automatically according to its nature and reacts to the external stimulus and also internal processes in a very specific way. There is no question about free will. Similarly, our senses, the five senses which have a physical aspect, eyes, ears, and there is their centers in our mind. Of course, there is also the brain, the nervous system, and the centers of these senses in the brain, and also there is the psychological centers of these senses in the mind. So, we cannot say that the senses have free will because they are also organs, psychological, physical, energetic, and psychological organs, and they function according to their nature automatically. So, also, there is no question about free will when we speak about senses. Then we go to the vital energy. Vital energy also is not conscious. According to the great teachings and teachers of the world, it's also something mechanical. And vital energy functions according to its nature. And the vital energy has five aspects: prana, apana, udana, samana, dhyana. And each part, each aspect of this prana has a very specific function in our system. Okay, and there are the physical aspect of this functioning and the psychological aspect. But I won't explain this in detail because it's not our subject. So obviously, the vital energy has no free will. Then we go to the sensory mind. Sensory mind is also a capacity to receive sensory stimulus, and this stimulus comes in the brain through the senses and the nervous systems. And the sensory mind, we could say, creates images and sounds using this stimulus. So this is also an automatic process. We do not do something in order to hear and see. It happens by itself. It's a process. So, of course, sensory mind has no free will. So we must see one by one all aspects, examine all aspects of our human existence to see what can have this capacity we call free will. Because without this examination, everything we may say about free will, it is meaningless, and we cannot have a correct understanding and vision of what free will is. Not possible, mission impossible. And as I said before, we must also define what free will means. So before I continue with the various levels of human existence, I will define what free will is according to my understanding and experience and knowledge. So free will means that I can decide something, choose something, without being this decision conditioned, imposed, or influenced by external factors than my consciousness. External function means also, in this case, our psychological conditioning, tendencies. For example, if I decide something under the dominion of lust, this is not free will. If something influence my decision, it's not free will. So, in my understanding, in my experience, free will, to exercise my free will means that I will choose or decide something without being subject to any influence, conditioning, limitation that is different or external to my consciousness. Of course, our subconscious mind and our energy field and all other aspects of mind are conditioned by our genes, the three gunas, which are Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, and the three uh, doshas, which are Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and the condition of society, of our family, of our schools, of everything that has come in our selves through the senses. So, of course, our mind is conditioned. And of course, when one person, one human being, is identifies completely with the conditioning, we cannot speak about free will. It is impossible. I repeat it because this is very important. Because free will implies a state of consciousness and also a psychological state. So, in the state of identification, lack of self-awareness, and lack of discrimination, we cannot speak about free will. It's just a joke. That means that the majority of people on earth cannot exercise their free will. But if I say this, it implies that we have free will. But the point is, are we capable to exercise our free will? Moment by moment, or sometimes? It depends on our evolutionary state. It depends in the state of consciousness we are here and now and every here and now, and our psychological state as well, the purity of mind and heart, and the development of higher capacities like discrimination, which is the eye of consciousness in us. Discrimination or discernment is the eye of consciousness in us. Without the development of discrimination or discernment, we are blind, 100%. So there is no talk about free will. We need consciousness, awareness, discrimination or discernment, and also in higher states, intuitive capacity of knowledge, then we can speak about free will. And also implies the capacity to not identify with the conditioning in the form of thoughts, impulses, desires, and beliefs of any kind, and knowledge. So, of course, we could say, all human beings, we have talents and capacities, but in order to express them fully, we must train ourselves. We may have, for example, the talent to be a great musician, but without practice, we will remain this talent inert, will not be manifested. Similarly, free will is a capacity I cannot find the proper word about this. It's not only capacity, it is an innate quality or capacity also that we have, and but in order to manifest this capacity, we have to train ourselves. It is not something like seeing. We can see everything through the eyes without any specific training, because it's just an instinctive functioning. But in human beings, because we are multidimensional beings, we cannot express and exercise all capacities without training. Only the instinctive and the basic capacities of human beings can be used and expressed without any specific training. It's like to say, can a human being, just because of birth, to be a Jesus Christ, a Buddha? Of course not. To become a Buddha needs a very long and very systematic and sincere and diligent practice and disciplines. We cannot become Buddhas just because of birth. It's so simple. So we cannot exercise our free will just because we have been born in a human physical body. We have to develop this capacity. It exists, this capacity. It is innate, as is, we could say, the capacity of discernment. Discernment is a capacity that only human beings can develop. A dog, a cow, a cat, they cannot, they cannot, even through training, to develop this capacity of discernment, because they are not, how to say, the nature has not given to them this potentiality to develop discernment. So regardless of how much we can train a dog, the dog cannot develop discernment. This is it. But human beings, we have this capacity innate, but this capacity cannot be expressed fully without undertaking a process which we call spiritual life and practice. And not only discernment, all higher capacities of human beings cannot be manifested just because we have taken this physical body. It's so obvious. That's why, as I said before, we have human beings that they are worse than animals, criminals, and brutals, what to say. And we have divine beings like Jesus Christ, like Buddha, like Krishna, like Ramana Maharshi, etc. So the free will is a possibility and a capacity that we can exercise and utilize according to our state of evolution and consciousness. That means the development of consciousness, of capacities of mind and heart, etc. It's not something that is granted to us just without, you can do this without undertaking any practice, any process, nothing. So, after saying all these things, it is clear that human beings, although in all human beings there is this capacity latent in their psyche, they are not capable to exercise free will. They live mechanically, unconsciously. Of course, they make choices, choices, but these choices are unconscious and mechanical, although they have the sense that they decide consciously. To decide something really consciously, we must awake. We must stop identifying ourselves with the body, with the mental, emotional conditioning, and develop all higher capacities to a great degree, like discernment, which, as I said before, it is the eye of consciousness in us. Without discernment, we are blind, totally blind. No matter what we believe about ourselves, without discernment, which is called viveka in Sanskrit, viveka, without viveka, we are just blind. We may think about ourselves the best, I'm the best, I'm wise, I am what I am, but this is just illusion. Only awakened beings that have been developed all higher capacities like discernment are capable to say that I can see clearly. So free will, it is not something that all human beings have. In reality, it's exactly the opposite. Only very few human beings can exercise fully free will. And what is free will, as I said before, is the capacity to choose something without being conditioned by influences, limitations of external factors. External factors means also our psychological conditioning, which this inner psychological world is external from one point of view. It's external of our consciousness, although everything is a manifestation of consciousness. But speaking from this point of view, all formations and conditioning and programming is something external to my consciousness. So if I make a decision under the influence of a factor that is a tendency, habit, belief, whatever may be, then this decision is not free will, because this decision has been made under the dominion or influence of this conditioning. In my experience and understanding, free will means to decide without being dominated by any influence external to me. Only with my consciousness and the mind, but the higher part of the mind, which is free from any conditioning, and of which the discernment is the eye of wisdom and consciousness. And also one more thing. To me, free will does not mean only to choose something, but it is the capacity to realize this something, to make it happen. So, for example, I can choose every day to do 1 hour meditation. But if I cannot do in practice this, okay, I take the decision, I make this decision. Every morning, 7 to 8, 1 hour meditation. Yes, but if I cannot do this because of any conditioning, because of boredom, because of resistance, because of dislike, because of whatever may be, then I have no free will, because there are other factors that obscure my free will, and so I cannot put in practice what I have chosen, what I have decided. This is not free will. So free will, in my understanding, is not only to choose something, but the capacity to make this something to happen as according to my will. So if I will every day to do 1 hour meditation, then I will do it because of the power of my free will. If I cannot do this, then in reality, I cannot exercise my free will. So my free will is not something we have or we don't have. It's something that develops as everything else in us. it's like discernment. It is not that we have or we don't have. It's like concentration. We can develop all these capacities little by little from a very low level to the highest possible level. So everything in life, all capacities in life can be developed. And I speak now mostly about human capacity, human being, the capacity of a human being. So we can develop discernment, we can develop dispassion, we can develop concentration, we can develop devotion, we can develop patience, we can develop everything. It's a matter of training. So we have this capacity of free will, but it's latent, and we have to develop this capacity. And what are the factors that obscure these capacities? It is the conditioning of mind in the form of desire, lust, pride, fear, anger, jealousy. It is not the information. Some they say it is the information that came in us through the senses, this is the conditioning. No. Information is information, neither negative nor positive. It's just information. Then, depending on how conscious we were the moment of any experience, this information can become a conditioning or not. So, for example, to be very precise and clear, the moment I see, because I'm a man, I use a woman because I'm a man. The moment I see in the street a woman, and the lust arises in me, and because of lust, I see this woman as an object of pleasure, this very moment, it is created in my subconscious mind a tendency and a program, a conditioning, a pattern. So, when I react towards, it is the mind that reacts, in reality, in my ego. But if I have not the capacity to function in another more conscious way, and in the presence of a woman, lust arises, and I identify with the woman, with the form of the woman, and the lust, immediately in my subconscious mind is created, they call in Sanskrit samskara, and this is a conditioning that will influence my decision making capacity and free will and perception. On the other hand, when in the presence of the woman, I'm capable to keep my attention and mind connected consciously with the consciousness within. And because of it, lust will not arise in me, for example. Or if lust arises in me, I do not identify with this lust. So I do not give room to this lust to function as according to its programming. And then I don't see woman as an object of pleasure, but as a human being. Then it is not created a pattern or a tendency in my psyche, in my subconscious mind. So I'm not limited by this experience. So if I consciously live this experience, that means in this case to see a woman without identifying myself with a woman and with the lust that expresses itself in me, then will not be created a conditioned pattern in my psyche. So I'm not conditioned by this experience. On the other hand, if I'm fully identified with the form of the woman, if I fully identified with the lust that has been expressed in me, then this very moment, a pattern or a tendency is created in my psyche, and this pattern or tendency will influence my perception and decision-making capacity and my free will. Because the next moment I will see a woman of this of a similar appearance, very easily lust will arise, and the desire to enjoy this woman will manifest as well, and my thinking and my will be conditioned by this desire. So I would like to have sex with this woman, and this is all conditioning. There is no free will. What could be here free will? It is to take a step back from this mechanical expression of lust, desire in the form of lust, connect consciously with inner silence, stop identifying with this tendency of lust, and avoid a full expression of this, and avoid all decisions that could be made due to this pattern or tendency. And by doing, for example, a kind of inquiry or investigation or whatever may be, I can dismantle or how to say, to make to realize the illusory nature of this tendency in me, of lust in this case. By being more and more conscious this very moment of the expression of lust in me, then I can stop identifying with this, and by doing an inquiry, I can realize, not only understand the illusory nature of it, and so by doing this, this tendency will subside, and I will be free from this tendency, and I can think and act not under the dominion of this tendency. This is free will. Because it is not conditioned by any other factor. It is only a decision that I made by the capacity of consciousness and discernment. Discernment and consciousness are free. There is no any conditioning in discernment. The point is that discernment can be obscured by the psychological conditioning that is stored in subconscious mind, yes. But discernment in itself, it is free. It's like our consciousness. Our consciousness is freedom itself. But because of mental emotional conditioning, we cannot experience fully this consciousness we are. That means we cannot experience fully the peace and plenitude and freedom and bliss we are, because all these are obscured by the mental emotional patterns, tendencies, and formations in general. So, although our consciousness is free from any kind of limitation, we cannot experience this freedom because of the limitations of the mind. And when I say mind, I do not refer only to thinking mind. Mind, as I said, have various levels and functions and limitations as well. So, discernment also in itself is free. It's a capacity that enables us to realize, to become aware of the falsity or the reality of anything. It is the eye, I will repeat it many times. Discernment is the eye of wisdom. It is the eye of consciousness in us. So by developing to the highest possible degree discernment, we can, in any situation, in any experience, to realize, to become aware, to know, you can use any word it's more convenient to you, we can realize, understand, become aware if this is false or true. And this realization, it is not conditioned by anything. It is the consciousness itself in action. And the second thing is, okay, for example, to be very practical, in the vision of a woman, again, because it's one of the most difficult tendencies to get rid, human beings. They are so attached to sexual pleasure and they have great problems. Most fail to realize God consciousness and get freedom because of lust. And then pride. And then avarice and greed in general. So, the moment I see a woman, if I lack of discernment and consciousness, I identify completely with the form I see, I identify with the reaction of lust in me, and say, oh, very good, what a nice woman, I would like to be with her, I want to have sex. We may think this, like this, or feel like this. And the problem is that we feel that all this thinking and feeling is us, and is a conscious choice. So in the presence of a woman or a man or whatever, I like this, very nice, oh, what a beauty, I would like to be with her or with him. This is an unconscious process, and because of lack of discernment, consciousness, or awareness, as you like, we don't realize. That means we do not discern this, what really happens. And so we are prey to this conditioning. For example, rape, sexual violence is because of this identification and lack of consciousness and discernment. These people that violate women is because they are so identified with these lustful thoughts and feelings that they cannot avoid this action. They are prey to this. This is a very concrete and very clear example. So these men that violate women sexually is because they are so identified with the impulse of lust, the feelings created by this impulse, and the thinking process, and they cannot avoid doing what they do. So in reality, these men are preys, are victims of this process. They are unconscious beings. In reality, they are sick people. They need therapy, not jail. And this happens to all of us, to all human beings, not in this extreme degree, but in reality, unconscious human beings live like this. They identify easily with their thought processes and feelings that are related with tendencies and desires and lust and fear and pride, and they decide everything they decide under the influence and the dominion of these tendencies. So there is no question about free will. Free will is to exercise our capacity to see what really happens, to realize, and this needs awareness and needs discernment, and this needs also clarity. So when we have clarity, discernment, and awareness, then we can be aware of what is really happening, avoid identification, and make this tendency subside, and then decide according to this realization, awareness, and discernment. And this is free will. So to speak about free will in general, to me, it's meaningless. We must examine this very important subject practically. So, okay, they may want to say, okay, I have this objective. Okay, is this free will when you stop identifying with the lust or any other tendency? Why is this free will? It's something that happens by itself. Really? If it's something that happens by itself, then all people on earth, could have this capacity fully developed and exercise this capacity. So, is this true? No. So, this capacity, it's not something that happens by itself. It's something that, of course, is an innate latent capacity that can be developed to the greatest, highest degree through training. We call spiritual practice and life. It's not happened by accident. Conscious life is not accidental. To me, all these things, it's a joke. And how I hear these scientists and spiritual teachers to speak, and then another objective, they say, okay, the decision is made by, they say by brain, but this is just ridiculous. Of course, all how to say, all abilities, capacities which are related to the mind, which is not the brain, mind and intellect are not the brain. They are so confused, the scientists and also spiritual teachers, but they don't know what they say. So, of course, the brain, it is something that is connected with the mind and the intellect. Everything in us is connected and interrelated. That's why the one affects the other. When, for example, happens something in the body, this may affect the brain and the mind related to the brain. The sensory mind, the external mind, because are interrelated, but are different things. So it's another thing to say that they are interrelated and the one affects and influence the other things. And it's another thing to say there is only brain, that everything it is a process of physical body, nervous systems, and the brain. That's why when we develop what we call dispassion and detachment, we may suffer physically, but we cannot suffer, we do not suffer mentally or intellectually, because we are detached fully. Because intellect and mind in general, not the physical part of the mind, are independent. Not independent in the same, they are different, and they can have some functions independent of the physical functions. So we can, what I mean, we can suffer physically, but mentally we can remain calm. But this to happen implies training. Because human beings, we are not by birth fully developed. We have to do many things in order to reach the highest rank of evolution. It's not something that happens by itself. So it is possible one human being to be born and die like an animal without undertaking any evolution, any change, without making any progress. And we can have a being that can reach the state of Buddha. So it is not by default that we can exercise our free will. So free will is related to the higher part of the mind, which has the capacity of discernment and being aware, and consciousness itself. So when we make decisions without our consciousness and discernment being obscured by the conditioning, then we exercise our free will. And when this decision, we can practice, we can put in practice this decision, we exercise our free will. It's so clear. Deciding against all conditioning and influences of external factors, it is a capacity of free will. And that's what they say something. You are here in this very specific place, so it is not your decision. You didn't decide to be, for example, be born in India or in Europe. It's something that happened. So where is free will? This is a very wrong way to think about. It doesn't matter. Of course, as a body, mind entity, I didn't decide to be here or there, but we don't know if this is something we did not decide as soul, first of all. We ignore this. Okay? So, as a physical body mind, we cannot know. But who or what made this decision to be born in this specific place? Of course, it's not the decision of the individual ego. It's something that is beyond this. Okay. But also, this the very fact that we have not decided to be born in a specific place does not mean that we cannot exercise our free will. For example, just to find an example about this. Because free will means to decide without external, the influence or imposition or limitation of external means, that mean factors, other factors than my consciousness and the capacity of discernment and will. Discernment will means the capacity not only to decide and put in practice, and to decide consciously and with freedom means, first of all, to know what is true and what is false. Without this discrimination, we cannot speak about free will. We must know clearly what is true and what is false, what is real, what is not real. And this is very clearly presented in Bhagavad Gita. You can read 3 chapters about the 3 gunas, 14 chapters, 17 and 18 chapters. In these verses, the writer clarifies the function of the mind and the intellect of the body, the knowledge, the happiness related to the 3 gunas. Sattva is the guna, the quality, it means the quality, more or less. It's not exactly the same, but anyway, sattva is the quality or the power or whatever that enables us to see things as they are with clarity. So God doesn't mean practically. When our mind functions in its sattvic state and is connected consciously with awareness, its true nature, then can see clearly what really happens and perceive things with clarity. There is no distortion and perversion of the perception. When the rajas and tamas prevail in our mind, then we cannot see things as they are. And we lack discernment. So we cannot speak about free will. Because free will implies consciousness and discernment. If we have not this clear in our mind, then we lose sight, the clear sight of what is really about, what really is about free will. So we cannot speak about free will in general without knowing or realizing what is free will and what element in us can exercise free will. Without having this clear in our minds, we cannot say anything correct. And also, they say something. Some people say, spiritual teachers as well, they say, the ego, this sense of individuality, is an illusion. So, in reality, decision is a process, and some elements in us undertake these processes or this process, and at the end decide what we will choose. And then comes the ego and says, I want this. But this wanting, it is something that already have been decided by some other elements unconsciously. But free will and unconsciousness makes no sense. We cannot exercise free will unconsciously. What means unconsciously and what means consciously? This is very important thing to clarify and understand deeply. In reality, to discern. So without realizing what means deciding consciously, to make a decision consciously or unconsciously, we cannot speak about free will correctly. If we do not understand that free will is related to conscious, how to say, to being conscious and have the capacity of discernment, we cannot understand what really free will is. And this is the most important thing to understand. And this last week, I have heard a person, I don't know, it considered this person very wise, and he speaks a lot in television, in channel, YouTube channel about free will and all these subjects. But it's his approach and the way he investigates, analyzes free will, in my experience and understanding, is very limited and cannot reach correct conclusions about free will. So what about the ego? They say, as I said, there is something in us that unconsciously, that means we are not aware of what is happening. Something in us decides, and then comes something in the surface consciousness and say, and we feel to do this without knowing why we have decided this. So it appears to be, and we obey in reality, we identify with this impulse to choose this or that. So there is no question of free will, which is correct for the people that live, they live unconsciously. Because, as I said, we cannot speak about free will if we are unconscious beings. And the discussion is over here. There is no question about free will for the majority of people on earth. But the question is not if majority of people have free will, if human beings have free will, and which one, who can exercise this free will. So does not apply the same thing to all human beings. The majority live unconsciously, so there is no question of free will. But this is not a full development of the human beings. This is why we are here, to exercise our free will. And to exercise our free will, first of all, we have to train ourselves and transform ourselves, purify our mind and heart, develop other capacities as well, and then little by little we become able to exercise our free will. It's like babies. When we were babies, we couldn't walk, but little by little, we sometimes later we did some steps and then we fall down again and again. And little by little, we learn to walk. Okay, you can say, okay, this is something that happens. It is not a conscious decision. Of course, correct. It's something that happens. But because this belongs to the instinctive nature of human beings. But as I said, all capacities in human beings are not related to the instincts or lower powers of nature. There are capacities that are related to consciousness. And consciousness by nature is free. And it is not subjected to everything that happens in nature. And human beings by nature are consciousness. But we have to develop this consciousness, not consciousness itself, but we have to develop the mental consciousness, we could say, or the psychological consciousness, so that we will become capable to realize the pure consciousness. It's a way to say it, but this needs a little more explanation, but it's not the time to do this. Because when consciousness, we could say, expresses itself through the mind, the conditioning of the mind distorts the clear and full expression of consciousness, obscures, better to say. So we have to purify the mind and transform our energies as well, and use sexual energy more precisely to develop the higher capacities of mind, which is related also to the higher chakras. And some say that divine Shakti or Kundalini is also the critical factor that can enable us to develop all capacity to the highest possible degree as human beings. And this I cannot ascertain this by my experience. It's something I know, I understand it, but I cannot say something from my own experience. So as we have to develop some capacities related to physical body, for example, to speak or to write, we have to go to the school. We cannot speak by accidentally. We have to undertake an education, and especially to write. Okay, speaking also, it is training, because we listen to our parents and others, and little by little we learn. It's something we learn to speak. It's not something that happens by itself, but it's very practical. But to write, we have to go to the school and little by little learn to write. So you can say also this is not something related to free will. Yes, I agree. But what I say is that as we must do something or not, even though it is not a free will, but we have to train ourselves to develop a capacity like walking or writing or I don't know. So the higher capacities of mind, which are related to free will, we must develop them through training. We cannot become capable to exercise our free will without training, without doing practice, without practicing systematically, regularly, and diligently. So I think that I have made clear after 1 hour what free will is and how we can exercise our free will. Possibly it is needed to say some examples, more examples to make it more practical. But the point is, the point you must have clear in your mind is that free will is related to consciousness and the higher capacities of mind. I wanted to explain a little more about the ego. They say, okay, the decision is made unconsciously, then something happens and we decide this or that, and then there is the ego, and they say that the ego is a thought, which is just ridiculous. Even the ego, of course, is not our, this sense of individuality is not, of course, our essential nature, but it's not illusory, or at least it's not so much illusory, more illusory than the physical body and other functions of our mind, psyche in general. Okay, and also there is a controversy about what really individuality is. There is the one thought, school of thought says that individuality is related to the ego, what we call ego, and let's see what this ego is. And the other school says that individuality is not related to the ego. It's something superior to the ego in us that creates the individuality. And so before we ascertain this, what truly really happens, what real individuality is, we also cannot reach safely in correct conclusions. We can speak a lot, but in vain. So they say, okay, the decision is made by unconscious processes, and then this decision comes to the surface mind, and we say, okay, I will do this. And this is just an illusion that you have decided. Okay, as I said, if we speak about unconscious people, this is like this. Because free will implies consciousness or awareness and implies discernment, which also implies knowledge and understanding. So we need knowledge, we need understanding, we need discernment and consciousness. And then we can add will, and the will is a capacity that goes together with discernment, with consciousness. They are not independent, as it appears to be. Because without consciousness, we cannot exercise our free will. Because if we do not know what is true and what is false, how we can exercise your free will? If you don't know what is true and what is false, and your decision, if your decision is true or false, how you can say about true will, free will? Not possible. We cannot separate free will from consciousness, discernment, and also right knowledge or correct knowledge. So, and in my experience, when the decision it has been made without the limitations or influences of any kind of conditioning tendencies, emotions, desires, etc., etc., and has been made fully consciously with discernment, awareness, and correct, right knowledge, then we speak about free will. And the capacity to exercise our free will is something that it can be developed. And it means also that sometimes we are more capable to exercise. We have a general level of capacity to exercise our free will. But this does not mean that every moment, every specific moment, each specific moment, we can exercise our free will with the same capacity as everything. For example, in football, we can say that the football player is of high level, but sometimes plays very very badly. Or a tennis player. Even the number one Djokovic played yesterday tennis in Australian Open, and he admitted that he played very badly. It is one of the worst performances he had in the Australian Open. Although he is the number one, he lost a match 3-0 from a young player. So the same applies to the spiritual capacities. We cannot exercise always our capacity of discernment, of dispassion, of detachment to the same degree in every situation. It depends in various factors. From the simplest one, that we are not energetically strong that very moment. Or because we are frustrated because of something, we cannot exercise our capacity of discernment, of concentration, of clear understanding. No. The same applies with free will. We are not only capable to exercise our free will equally with the same clarity and with the same clarity and strength because of various factors. When our mind and heart, subconscious mind, become totally free from all conditioning, then we are capable to exercise free will in all conditions and circumstances. Because our mind is not conditioned by anything else done and decides according to consciousness, which is free by itself. By default, consciousness is free. If consciousness is not free, there is no talking about freedom. And consciousness is not only the capacity to be aware, as many may think. It's the capacity to exercise its powers through the mind, human mind, in nature. And when I say nature, I mean not only physical dimension, not other dimensions of nature. So consciousness expresses itself as human being and prepares the human being through a successive births. And then this being becomes more and more capable to exercise free will. And what does mean free will? The will that is in accordance to consciousness. Does not mean or imply a free will independent of consciousness. Because we are consciousness, and that's why it's free will. We are not the body and the mind. We are consciousness. And as consciousness, if we prepare our vehicles, that mean mind, intellect, and all other aspects of mind, we can express this free will totally. Otherwise, this free will is obscured by the conditioning of the mind and subconscious mind, intellect, etc. So it's not, this question is not answered, we have or we don't have. This is no sense. It's just ignorance. It's like to say, I have awareness or I do not have awareness. I don't speak about the absolute consciousness. I mean, as a human being, I have awareness or I have not awareness. No. I can exercise the awareness according to my state of consciousness at this very moment. And I can develop this capacity more and more. And what I say here is what I experience, not what I invent in my mind. I can exercise my capacity of detachment, of discernment, of dispassion, each moment according to my level of consciousness and development of my psyche. Psyche means mind at all levels. So, and there is no free will independent to consciousness. That's why I will tell you this very simple thing. Jesus Christ said very clearly, we can find this in the Bible, in the New Testament. Me and my Father, we are one. And what I decide is the decision of my father. And what the father decides is my decision, because there is no duality. Because the apparent, seemingly individual consciousness and God consciousness is one consciousness, apparently different or separated because of the conditioning of the mind. So Jesus Christ said this very simple with this expression: my Father and me, we are one. What I say, it is what my Father said, and what my Father said is what I say. There is no difference at all. Because the consciousness we are is God Himself, itself, better, not Himself, not herself. It's God itself in us. And there is no question to say that God has free will. So if we decide from consciousness without the obstruction of any other factor, then we exercise our free will. And there is no doubt about this, no question. So we have free will. Of course, our body and lower aspects of our existence are subject to the laws of nature. But even in this case, we know that great yogis and Jesus Christ himself, they are capable even to overcome even the laws of nature. And they can also, I'm not sure, I cannot say sure with certainty in this, but I do not say that it cannot be done. They have also the capacity to maintain their physical body for many ions without dying. So the moment, and this is free will, this is pure free will. Only by pure free will, they can even decide and realize what they think to make this body immortal. So there is no free will as something different than consciousness, and this consciousness expresses itself in us as intuitive knowledge and discernment. Discernment is the eye of wisdom. So without these capacities, discernment, clear perception, clear understanding, and correct knowledge, we cannot speak about free will. Because everything we decide, it is subject or conditioned by something. Of course, we could say, to some degree, we can exercise our free will, little by little, to small things. That means, for example, the very moment we are capable to avoid identification with the mental or emotional formation that expresses, or tendency that expresses in us, it is an action of free will. Because the only way to avoid identifications is to become conscious and discern yourself as consciousness from that very thing that is different than consciousness. That means that it's a conscious process. And this is an expression, exertion, say, I don't know if I say it correct now, of free will. Avoiding identification with the mechanical patterns of life that express themselves in us as lust, greed, fear, is a conscious action. It is an action of free will. So simple. Of course, this capacity is something that develops, increases. It's not something that it is, you have it or not. It, as I said before, as any other capacity. Of course, free will, as I said, is consciousness itself. But in our condition as human beings, we cannot express fully this because of the conditioning of the mind at all levels. So by purifying our mind and heart at all levels, and by developing all higher capacities, we become more and more capable to express our free will, which is the nature of the consciousness, which is our true identity and nature. So negating free will is to negate our identity is consciousness. So although physical body, energy, or physical sensory mind are conditioned and have not the capacity to make conscious decision, we are not only them. We are essentially consciousness, and consciousness expresses itself through sattva in the dimensions of the life. And when sattva prevails in our mind, intellect, subconscious mind as well, or mind in adhakarana, how they call it, when the whole mind is of sattva, when sattva prevails at all levels of mind, then this free will can be exercised fully. The more our mind becomes pure and luminous and transparent, and the more is connected with the consciousness, which is freedom itself, the more it becomes the mind capable to exercise free will. And free will is not something independent of consciousness. That does not mean that I do as an individual what I like, because this is a misperception, misunderstanding of free will. Free will does not mean me as the ego, me, body, mind, entity, I do what I like. This is exactly the opposite. It's a distortion of free will, and it's a wrong understanding. Free will is to do what consciousness wants, and this consciousness I am. But because of conditioning, we feel that we are a body, mind, me entity, and we have likes and dislikes, and then we think that we exercise our free will by deciding this sweet or that food or this drink or that drink. This is illusion. Of course, this is an illusion. It is a relative free will, but in reality, it's not free will in the truest meaning of the word. It is free will in the sense that, for example, I want to eat something. Then I go to the restaurant and I have to choose spaghetti or rice. Okay? There is no power outside me to say you have to eat spaghetti or you have to eat rice. So I decide me, and I say, oh, today what I like, spaghetti. Okay, you can have this objective. Yes, you like, or something in you like spaghetti. Of course, something else in me likes spaghetti today and not rice. Of course, it's not me. But me, I can agree with this impulse for spaghetti or discard it. I have the free will to say, okay, something in me wants spaghetti, but I decide not eating spaghetti. I have this capacity, I have it. Am I capable to exercise this capacity? Depends. Of course, this is also, it's not the purest expression of free will, as I have already presented during this lecture, we say, or this talk. Better to say, not lecture, it's a talk. So this is a relative free will, because there is not something external to us that imposes something to decide according. Then we can say that the instincts decide for us, and then we think that we decide. This is correct, because the moment we identify with the impulse of instinct that likes to eat this or that, this is not free will. So when we go to the restaurant, and because our gluttony wants to eat, for example, spaghetti, and we identify with this impulse, it's not a free will decision. It's conditioning. But appears to us that we have made this decision. But this is delusion. Anyway, but this does not mean that there is only this in us, that happens only this. This is only a lower level of making decisions. We make decisions because of likes and dislikes. because of condition of the past experiences. So, for example, Indian people in India prefer to eat a lot of chili, which is not the case in Europe, for example. Okay, also there are people here in Europe that they like chili, but in India it is more common. Or also in India they like prepare many plates of with let's say basmati rice, which is not something here very so much common. It is very common in India. So this preference of rice is not something related to free will. So if you like more rice than spaghetti, it's a conditioning. But this conditioning in itself does not have the power to condition us. It has the power to condition us only when we identify with the body and the mind. So by doing practice, what we call spiritual practice or yoga or whatever we may call it, we can little by little develop all higher capacities and stop identifying ourselves with the mechanical functions and tendencies and past experiences, and make conscious decisions that in reality help us to become more and more free from the conditioning. And the ultimate goal is to reach this state we call enlightenment, which is not only the realization that we are conscious, which is also a false concept that circulates in the Western spiritual circles. Enlightenment is not only the realization that we are consciousness, but is the full enlightenment of mind, which implies a full, total elimination of all kinds of tendencies, rajas and tamas from the mind, and implies also that the mind has become luminous as consciousness itself. It has become luminous as consciousness itself, because of constant abundance of the mind in consciousness, which is its source. So enlightenment is not just realizing I am consciousness, it's the full the total transformation of mind and total freedom of mind of any conditioning, and the total transformation of mind that becomes totally luminous as consciousness itself. This is enlightenment. This is a Buddha mind, not just the mind of one person that has realized that is consciousness. This is, we can say, a partial enlightenment. So, this is what I wanted to share with you. I hope that all these ideas that I have shared with you will help you to make your own investigation. But believe me, because this is something I investigate many years. And what I found is that by becoming my mind more and more purer and purer and more transparent and conscious, every time I did this investigation, I could understand all this subject more profoundly and correctly. It is not. That's why I say it is not a matter of investigation and reflection on free will. If you are not capable, that means if your mind is not in the proper condition, that means clear and conscious, etc., you cannot realize what really happens with free will. Impossible. It's like to say that a human being that is totally identified with the body and lives in the unconscious state, to understand what really means living, dueling in consciousness, in pure consciousness. They will understand only words, but they will be totally confused. Because these things cannot be correctly understood or correctly understood without a proper instrument. We cannot do investigation of all things of life without preparing our instrument, which is mind. That's why self-realization cannot be attained or achieved without preparation of the vehicle we call adhkarana, or mind, intellect, subconscious mind, which are the three levels of mind, main levels. They may be more levels, but three main levels is external sensory mind, thinking mind, emotional mind, intermediate mind, buddhi, and subconscious mind. And they have as a center the ego. So without the development, preparation and development of this andhkarana, we cannot reach the state of self-realization. Because from another point of view, we are already the self-realized. Yeah, because we are already consciousness. But without reaching this state of total purity of mind and absorption of mind in consciousness, we cannot talk about self-realization. Okay, this is what I wanted to say today about this very important subject, we call free will. And what I want to point out in this final part of the talk, it is that the better way to see this free will is to see it practically. How this free will can be exercised practically in the everyday life, and not as a theory in the mind, abstract theory, which has no practical value in my everyday life. Because most or all scientists speak about all these subjects they investigate theoretically. But this does not make them more conscious. So the most important thing, the whole life, process of life in general, not our life, that is to become more and more conscious and reach this state we call self-realization or God realization. That means to realize the unity of life and oneness of life, that we are God itself in manifestation. Of course, there are also secondary purposes of life. But the central and the highest purpose of life is us, we as human beings, to realize that we are consciousness, it's in expression itself, and we express ourselves as this universe. So the most important thing is to understand how we can exercise our free will in practical life, in everyday life, moment by moment. For me, the most important thing is to exercise our free will and discernment and attention and awareness in order to stop identifying ourselves with all conditioning, mental, emotional, intellectual conditioning, and stop becoming a victim or a prey of all this conditioning, and stop making decisions in an unconscious way that in reality provokes us pain and suffering and makes us become more unconscious. Because unconscious decisions in the wrong way create more unconsciousness in us. So to make as much as possible conscious decisions in our everyday life, moment by moment, we must learn and become capable to exercise our free will, which implies to exercise our capacity of discernment and detachment And self-awareness means awareness of the silent space of consciousness, moment by moment. This is the exercise of free will. By living attentively, moment by moment, by living in conscious awareness of our divine essence, the silent space of consciousness within, by exercising our capacity of attention and discernment in order to stop identifying with everything that arises in our psyche. That means thoughts, emotions, imagination, beliefs, ideas, etc., etc., and discern their illusory nature. This is we exercise our free will, and this is the most important thing. Not just to speak like scientists about free will as if were this a subject of just talking. No, we have to live our everyday life. And what does it mean to live consciously and exercise my free will in everyday life? It is clearly what I said to you, what I told you a little before. To live attentive and conscious awareness of silent space of consciousness, avoiding identification and exercising our capacity of detachment and discernment and awareness. Awareness in relation to our true self and awareness in relation to the psychological stuff, forms. This is to exercise our free will in a practical way. Okay, some spiritual teachers or whatever, I don't know, may say this is not free will. I don't care. I don't care. They have to find themselves about themselves what free will is. I have explained very clearly what free will is in all these, how many? 60, 97 minutes, what free will is. And this is my understanding, this is my experience. Okay, I'm open to listen something different, may I can have another point of view, but to me it's very clear that free will is related to consciousness, the consciousness we really are, and our higher capacities of mind like discernment, especially discernment, which is the eye of wisdom and the eye of consciousness, which enable us to discern what is true, what is false, what is real, what is unreal, what is wrong, what is right. Without discernment, we cannot realize these things. So to exercise our free will and make conscious decisions, we need this discernment. We need awareness. We need conscious contact with the essential nature, which is pure consciousness. This is it. Then we can exercise our free will. And the more our mind becomes pure, and the more our mind becomes transparent and luminous, and the more is our mind free from any conditioning, and the more our mind is connected consciously with consciousness, the more we can exercise our free will and gain independence and of all mechanical laws of nature. Thank you for being with me all this time. I hope I help you at to some degree at least to, or at least gave you some points to make your own investigation. And as I said before, the most important thing is to understand how we can exercise our free will to the degree we can do this moment to moment in our everyday life. That implies self-awareness, detachment, discernment, living attentively in self-awareness and exercising our discernment and detachment and capacity to perceive with full attention. Thank you for being with me. I wish you peace, love, and light. I wish you to realize your true nature in this very life and be free from any kind of conditioning and suffering created by the ego itself. I wish you very nice night. Namaste.